What made medieval executions so popular wasn't just the blood, it was the theater. Gallows stood in town squares, center stage, where crowds gathered not in horror but in excitement. Mothers brought children, vendors sold snacks, musicians played. It wasn't just justice, it was entertainment. In a world where death unfolded in daylight, public executions became strange festivals of fear, spectacle, and celebration. In this journey, we uncover how society turned human suffering into a show, and why the crowd loved every dreadful moment. What made medieval executions unforgettable? One story captures it all: the brutal fate of Sir William Wallace. In 1305, after leading Scotland's rebellion, Wallace was captured and dragged to London. His execution wasn't just punishment. It was a message meant to crush the spirit of rebellion. Crowds filled the streets as Wallace, stripped and bound, was paraded through the city. He was hanged, cut down alive, disemboweled and quartered. His head was mounted on London Bridge. To modern minds, this sounds cruel, but in the Middle Ages, executions were grim theater, a warning from rulers demanding obedience. The market buzzed with food vendors, children on shoulders, and gossip about the condemned man's final words. Wallace's death reminds us, these weren't private acts. They were staged events, designed to control the crowd as much as punish the victim. Across medieval Europe, public executions were more than death. They were power, spectacle, and entertainment. In medieval times, death was more than punishment. It was a lesson. Every execution sent a message: stay in line or suffer the same fate. Picture the town square as whispers spread. A man is dragged to the gallows. His crime, stealing bread. To rulers, that wasn't desperation. It was defiance. These weren't just punishments. They were morality plays. Each execution reminded the crowd, obey or this could be you. Rulers understood fear. A thief lost a hand. A poacher was hanged. A traitor tortured and destroyed, like William Wallace. The message: loyalty protects, rebellion destroys. Church leaders added weight. Priests urged repentance and warned of sin's cost. Even in death, the condemned served a purpose: to teach through terror. And it worked. Fear kept peasants obedient and knights loyal. In that square, life and death weren't just in God's hands. They were in the king's. In medieval society, morality and murder walked side by side. It sounds strange today, but in medieval times, execution day wasn't always grim. For many towns, it felt like a festival, a dark carnival of life and death. As word spread that someone would hang at sunrise or be beheaded at noon, villagers gathered early. They brought children, neighbors, even friends from nearby towns. Vendors set up stalls by the gallows, selling bread, meats, spiced wine. Hawkers offered charms or tiny noose-shaped souvenirs. Minstrels played cheerful tunes that drowned out the prisoners' sobs. For some, it was business. For the poor, rare excitement, a break from toil, laughter mixed with prayers. Children clung to mothers as the executioner sharpened his blade. When the rope snapped or the axe fell, gasps and cheers erupted like a theater's final act. The market roared back to life, selling more ale to wash down the death. Brutal, strange, but normal. In these markets of misery, suffering became celebration. He stood apart from the crowd, not fully man, not fully monster, something in between. The executioner. In the medieval world, this was no ordinary job. His hands delivered the king's justice. His axe, rope, sword turned men into lifeless warnings. For that, people feared him and needed him. On execution day, all eyes turned to the hooded figure by the gallows. Was he smiling beneath the mask? No one knew. Some said he was cursed, carrying the souls of the dead. Others believed he was chosen by God to do what no one else dared. Strangely, in some towns, the executioner became a celebrity. Children stared, men nodded nervously, women looked away, or some whispered, admired his dark power. He might be secretly welcomed with drink or banished to the edge of town. It was a lonely life, but on the scaffold he ruled. His blade could kill swiftly or turn death into performance. Some became legends, feared for their speed or for their cruelty. Monster, hero, necessary evil, no one knew. But when the executioner raised his axe, history was written in blood. You thought the execution was the main event. It wasn't. It was the torture. That's what the crowd came for, to watch a man break. Slowly. Ropes, blades, fire, tools laid out like prizes. The executioner smiles, the prisoner sobs, and you can't look away. This isn't quiet death, this is theater. His skin splits, screams echo off stone. His body twists into shapes no man should make. Some laugh, some cheer. You smell burning flesh, hear bones snap, see blood drip. Slow, thick, dark. 1 lash for theft, 10 for rebellion, 100 for treason. But the sentence isn't the point. The show is. Pain as warning, pain as lesson, pain as entertainment. Mothers lift children to see. Vendors shout. Priests whisper prayers no one hears. And you wonder, does he wish for death now? Is this worse than the rope, the axe, the fire? Probably, because this death is slow, savored, served like a feast. A body turned into a message, obey or suffer. The screams die last, but the lesson lasts forever. You thought justice was real, fair, honest, pure. Not here, not in the castle's cold heart. Here trials were theater, lies dressed in robes. The verdict already decided. You'd be dragged in, chained, beaten, blinded by torchlight. Faces stared down, smiling, not kindly. They knew how your story ended. Confess, they said, to witchcraft, treason, blasphemy. It didn't matter. Say the words or suffer. Racks creaked, thumbs crushed, hot irons sizzled. A whisper, confess, and maybe the pain stops. Maybe. Some broke, some screamed, some begged to die. Then came the performance. The crowd gathered to hear your confession. The script they wrote. Words spilled from your cracked lips. I was guilty, I betrayed the crown, I sinned before God. Lies, but the crowd cheered. Because this wasn't justice, it was a show. And your suffering was the main act. No escape, no truth, no mercy. Just a final bow before the rope tightened. The gallows stood tall at the center of town, not hidden, but displayed. Executions weren't quiet affairs. They were events, and crowds came willingly, even eagerly. Entire families gathered. Children watched from their parents' arms. Vendors circled with bread and beer. For many, it wasn't just punishment. It was public theater, equal parts fear and fascination. But this wasn't just spectacle for spectacle's sake. These executions carried a message. Defy the law, and this is your fate. Rulers knew the power of fear, and the gallows made that fear visible. Death became a warning, played out on a stage for all to see. Parents didn't shield their children, they brought them. They believed watching would teach obedience. The lesson was brutal but clear. Crime leads to the rope, and mercy has limits. Sometimes the person condemned was familiar, a neighbor, a friend, a former ally. Still, the crowd came. Curiosity outweighed grief. Justice had to be seen to be believed. Executioners understood the performance, their timing, their silence, the slow unfolding of fate. It was all deliberate. The final moments weren't rushed. They were calculated, made to leave an impression. And when the trapdoor opened or the axe fell, the crowd reacted. Some gasped, some cheered. Others simply stood in silence, knowing the show was over, but the message would echo long after. In a world ruled by fear, death was public for a reason, not just to punish one, but to control all. Not every execution ended with applause. Sometimes the crowd, usually silent, obedient, even entertained, turned. There were moments when the violence went too far, when punishment slipped into cruelty, and the people watching felt something shift. The cheers faded, the silence deepened, and then came the anger. Public executions were meant to control, to remind citizens of the cost of disobedience. But they also depended on the illusion of justice. When that illusion shattered, when a child was hanged, or an innocent screamed for mercy, the crowd no longer saw law, they saw murder. In rare but powerful moments, the crowd pushed back. Stones were thrown, ropes were cut. Executioners were chased from the scaffold, soldiers were called in. The line between order and rebellion thinned. It was dangerous ground. Rulers relied on public fear, but not too much fear. Push the people too far, and the spectacle backfired. Some towns saw executions halted mid-process, the condemned dragged away alive by sheer force of public outrage. In others, the officials who ordered the death found themselves suddenly unwelcome, or worse. This tension between justice and cruelty, punishment and excess, was always there, just beneath the surface. And when it boiled over, it reminded the powerful of a simple truth. Fear could control a crowd, but injustice could ignite it. In those rare, unforgettable moments, the scaffold stopped being a stage and became a spark, not of law, but of resistance. Not every execution went as planned. Even the most experienced executioners faced failures. Axes that slipped, ropes that snapped, and blows that didn't deliver the final mercy. These botched moments shattered the ritual's control and turned fear into chaos. When a head refused to fall cleanly, the crowd held its breath. Sometimes the condemned seized that moment, speaking brave last words that echoed far beyond the gallows. Their courage unsettled the spectators and even challenged the authority that demanded their death. These disasters didn't stay confined to the scaffold. News of a failed execution spread quickly, whispered in taverns, shouted in markets, and retold in hushed tones around fires. They became legends, stories of horror, defiance, or divine intervention. Execution disasters exposed the limits of power. They revealed the human element behind the spectacle, a reminder that death was unpredictable, even when planned with precision. For rulers, these moments were dangerous. A failed execution could spark sympathy for the condemned, fuel doubts about the justice system, and sometimes even inspire rebellion. In the grim theater of medieval punishment, perfection was demanded, but never guaranteed. And when things went wrong, the crowd witnessed not just death, but a crack in the facade of control. Those failures became part of the dark folklore, stories that blurred the line between terror and hope, reminding all who watched that even in the darkest moments, human courage could shine through. Over time, the crowds that once flocked to executions began to fade. The cheers gave way to silence or outright discomfort. What was once accepted as justice became seen as barbaric, shameful, and inhumane. Society changed. Ideas about punishment shifted from public spectacle to private confinement. Executions moved behind prison walls, away from curious eyes and roaring crowds. The brutal theater of pain and death no longer fit with growing notions of dignity, rights, and justice. The show ended, replaced by quieter, more controlled methods of enforcement. But the shadow of those bloody spectacles lingers. The fear, the power plays, and the hunger for control left marks on history. reminders of how deeply pain was woven into public life. Though the gallows disappeared from town squares, their legacy remains, a haunting echo of a time when death was both punishment and performance, watched by all, feared by many, and remembered by history. Public executions were once as popular as football matches. Be honest, would you have gone to watch a medieval execution if you lived back then? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.